have Luther Banks. We got security in the back. Corey's in the middle, and Mike is right there. And these are the top mix engineers in Atlanta. Don't get it twisted. And I think the number one thing that people have a trouble with, like when they go from like a recording session to a mixing session and working with professionals, is what do they actually need to bring for this session to make it successful? It seems like a lot of times people come for a mix session and that session ends up not even happening because they don't have what they actually need. So what do people need to bring?
Yeah, I mean, I run into that a lot when most times it's the track outs, what they were talking about before. They come in with a 2-track. They paid, like we have a mechanism here where you can actually get a song mixed with a 2-track. It's not the best option because you just, I can't really get in and dig into the music and blend everything the way that you would want me to and that I'd like to.
You go ahead. Scale on it. If a track out is a 10, you can mix it to a 10. You just have a 2-track. Where can you mix it to?
It depends on the 2-track. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So like the 2-track could be, well, if it's distorted, I'm not going to mix it anyway. You know what I mean? We're going to have to figure something else out. But the blend on that 2-track may not be good enough to fit vocals into it. You know what I mean? There are some there's some tricks that I can use, but it's never going to be exactly what it would have been if we had the multi-track. So if you paid for a multi-track mix, then I'm going to say, hey, let's reset this. Let's figure out what we can do. Let's get in contact with the producer. You go home. Let's sort it out, and then come back another day. Because you're paying for quality, so that's what I want to give you. So that's one of the things that I want from you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever got a mix where the producer actually, well, the artist showed you the track out, and like I know a lot of times the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the tracks are not always balanced the right way. Everything's pointing straight up. You guys ever have it to where you have to actually like turn the sound to the left, turn the drum to the right? That's a mixing process.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean that's actually pretty common. I mean, we actually prefer to have, unless there's certain things like they have some effect where they only want it to be on the right side. We want that printed like that. But for the most part, we want everything to either, if it's a mono sound, we want it to be mono. If it's a stereo sound, we want it to be stereo. But we can, like with drum sets, different engineers will pan like the hi-hats one way and all this and that. So that's all interpreted in the mix.
Back is to, you were asking, like, can you mix this as a, like, levels, a scale of this is a 10, this is a whatever. The issue with mixing a 2-track, and you can have, like, the best mixed 2-track that a producer did. Like, they kind of know what they want the music to sound like, right? But the issue is they didn't mix anything on that track with an idea of what the vocals were going to be. So there's your problem. So a lot of producers, and even when I mix instrumentals for producers a lot because they wanted to hit harder to sell the beat, right? So when I mix it, I don't think about vocals. I'm not thinking who's going to rap on this, who's going to sing on this. Is it going to be a guy? Is it going to be somebody with a low voice, a high voice, a kid? Who knows, right? So I'm going to make that snare hit hard, right? I'm going to make the kick hit hard. But then when I put vocals on that, I don't want that. I'm not going to want that snare cracking where it's covering up the vocal. Every time that it hits, it ducks down the voice and stuff like that. So the issue is that it's not even where it's a scale of where you can mix a 10 to this or that. Even if the track is mixed really good, you're still kind of limited because now you got to still put the vocals on top of the track. You can't put them in the track. So I have no option to say, okay, well, this instrument is annoying. Frequency on this instrument is bothering the vocal. So instead of being able to even pan it over to the side to get it out of the way, I can't even do that. So I'm stuck to where the producer puts up. And that's not to say the producer's tracks aren't mixed well. They're mixed well for what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell the beat. It's a different idea. So when you're mixing the song for everything with the vocals and everything else added, and even if you overdub, say you're like, oh, I want to add a sound to it, and you add a sound, even you can't get that to fit properly into the mix because it's already kind of stuck with the way the producer did it. And a lot of times the issue I have too with like pre-mixed 2-tracks is that a lot of times producers are mixing them on headphones, right? Maybe they're doing them, they don't have a studio, they're working at home. They can't turn up a 15-inch sub in their apartment. So the bass is always too much. Most of the time the bass is just too much because they overcompensate so they can hear it good in the headphones or on the laptop. And then when you get in a studio where you actually have 15, 18-inch speakers, it's just way too much bass, and you have to end up tuning EQing the track down some just to try to get things to fit in properly. So that's the biggest issue I think with 2-tracks is not that the track is necessarily mixed wrong, it's just not mixed for what you added as a vocalist.
You got a question, man?
Sure. In regards to loudness, I feel like a lot of new producers, DJs especially, maybe are limiting their music to where it sounds a lot louder. Like every year I feel like I hear a song that's exponentially feel like there's like a war for loudness, and people are just going loud and big to grab attention. What dangers do we face in the war of loudness?
That is a perfect question to ask mastering, which is next after us. He will love to talk to you about the Loudness War,
probably chomping at the bit
where it
right now.
started, and where it is now, and what he fights every day. Because really, that's more of when we mix a song, we mix it at a level that allows the mastering engineer to do his part, right? So that is a perfect question to ask him, because what he'll end up getting is a lot of engineers that are like, if they didn't get mixed here and it comes from somewhere else, they're trying to beat the last guy before it even gets to the mastering process, and it really limits to what he's allowed to do. And as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the Loudness War is out of control. Because you're exactly right. It's what they're trying to do is make theirs louder to make more attention, as opposed to, hey, maybe I should just write a good track and have a good song that people can sit there and there's dynamics to it. Because I've listened to a couple of albums recently that came out, and I'm like, I can't even make it through 3 or 4 songs. Not even that the songs are bad. They fatigue me just to listen to them. My ears are so tired and so beat down by that same beating that they got on it, like the edge that they put on it or whatever, that I can't even make it through an entire album. And it starts to sound all redundantly the same. Like every song might be different, but by the time they master it the way that they're doing, and everybody's like, oh, make it louder, I want mine louder, I want mine louder, it all just starts to sound like the same clutter throughout the entire album. So that's definitely bring that topic up when you talk to Kenny, because he's coming on after us, and he can give you a lot more information on that.
Go ahead, man.
As far as mixing and like hearing the dynamic ranges, adding the effects and whatever, what can you do to like train your ears better to like hear the subtle differences, like as far as you're doing? Like, 'cause I know when I was doing compression, like first I was like, I don't hear any difference at all. But then later on you start messing with the knobs, you start to hear the difference. So what can you do to train your ears for like anything else?
No, you go ahead, bro.
Well, I mean, for me personally, when you listen at lower levels, you hear a lot more subtle details. And so, I mean, you ask a lot of mixers, they listen to a lot of things. Whether I'm at home watching TV, it's always dumb low. And that's just out of, you just tend to hear more subtle details. And so, like when you're learning how to use a compressor or this and that, and you're playing with the knobs, that's when you start being able to really pinpoint subtle details, subtle changes, when you constantly train your ears by listening low as opposed to listening loud.
It's like everything sounds good loud.
Right.
Like it could be a horrible mix, but if you turn it up really loud, it's like, oh man, this is cranking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else you could do to train for subtlety?
I mean, just what you were saying, you know what I mean? The actual training part, you know what I mean? So you said at one point you couldn't really tell, but after a while of actually doing it and working with the compressor, you realize what's going on. So it's the same thing, you know what I mean?
I always say, like, make it really wrong, so you know what really wrong sounds like. So,
Yeah.
because when I tell people they'll come from school, like our interns always come from a school, right? So they've taught them, here's how a compressor works. And I'm like, well, did they ever show you how it works when it's really wrong? Like I said, when it's pumping, I ask them, do you know what pumping is? And nobody, you know what pumping is?
Yeah, it's like whenever
Yeah, okay, so a lot of the guys come in here, they don't know what pumping. I'm saying, okay, let's make the compressor pump so you know what's wrong. So the biggest thing is knowing, like, subtle things, like you say, and you start to learn as you're in. But I'm like, if you make it really wrong, so you know what you're listening for, you'll know when that comes around. Because I came in the studio before at times, and there'll be some outside engineers in here, and I'm looking at the compressor, and I'm just watching it just pumping and slamming in there. Because when you're sitting in the control room, your back is to the compressor, or your side, depending on how you're sitting at the desk. And my thing is, like, they're not hearing this. I'm like, why are you not hearing this? You shouldn't have to see the lights to know that the compressor's not working right. So a lot of my thing is, don't sit there and staring at it to see what it's doing. Just listen to it and then make a massive adjustment, and then hear how wrong that sounds, how bad it makes it sound to you. And then you'll know how this, because what happens with the compressors in here, especially, people walk by and their knee will brush them, and it'll turn the knob. And then all of a sudden now it's doing this when it wasn't doing that before, but the engineer is so untrained to listen. They're like, oh, well, I don't see the plugin in Pro Tools doing lights, so I don't really know what it's, you know what I'm saying? And like things like one knobs, dumbass plugins like that. What is that? I mean, you're gonna turn one knob and it's gonna do all this stuff. That's ridiculous. So my thing is, you got to, like you're saying, you got to train to listen. And what I like to do is a lot of times too is, not only do I try to make it really wrong, is like, if I'm saying, okay, is this reverb really doing it all? I turn up really loud, so I hear this massive amount of reverb, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't really sound correct. I don't really want that cavernous of a sound. And so I'll not even just turn it down, but I'll dial down to a smaller room. Okay, I need a smaller room on this, even though I'm gonna duck it down, and probably if it's really low, it's not gonna do as much of this cavern sound. It's still gonna affect my mix and make it muddy, because I got all this extra I don't really need. So a lot of times I'll just make things exaggerant so I can hear them, and then I'll make my tuning down, and then I'll put it back into place. But like you're saying, a lot of times you just got to listen to really just start training your ears to listen instead of looking at mixes, And then a lot of times I'll sit down, just close my eyes, and or I'll look up at the ceiling and then I just listen to what I'm hearing. And a lot of times I'll go back and I just pull everything down, right? I got all my EQs and my compressors and all that stuff set, but I'll pull all my faders back down and I'll just start over with my eyes closed, pulling up a level at a time and kind of setting it. I'll get my pinpoint of my kick or whatever was going to be my main. I'll get that at right 0 point, and then I'll just start adding the things in, just kind of visualizing the music as opposed, in my brain, as opposed to seeing little lights blinking and, oh, let me just keep turning all these faders up until all the meters are at 0. That's crazy. You got to really listen to what it is, and I think a lot of people look too much.
That's true. When I was interning here, I would sit in with Mike on his mixes, and I remember this one time where he did that. He like rolled his chair back and he just kind of closed his eyes and sat there for a second. And I was like, what is he doing? And he just kind of like sat there with his eyes closed. I was like, is he okay? And he started doing the thing. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I don't know if this happens to you guys. Like if I'm ever working on something at home, I go empty the dishwasher and then I hear something wrong. Like whenever you step away, like you get away, you go do something else. You're like, oh man, what was that? That's cool too. How important is references for mixes? What is a reference?
You mean like you talking about what the rough
Like,
mix?
yeah, like I want my song, the rough mix A, and then B, song that isn't the rough mix, but they want it to sound like that.
Gotcha.
How
Okay.
important is that, and
So-
what is that?
Yeah, so I'll address the ref. I would address both of them. So like the reference. So you're saying like they come to you and be like, okay, well I want my song to sound like this Rihanna song. That's
Yeah.
what you mean?
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll listen to the reference and then I'll try to pinpoint, okay, what is it about this particular song? Okay, what kind of feel does that have? And then I'll go to like the song that I'm working on and see if it has some of those same type of elements to create that feel. And if it does, then cool, I know how to work. But if it's like something like way out of left field and I'm like, okay, well what is it? I'll just straight up ask them like, what is it about that reference that they want me to incorporate in their mix if it's something totally different. Now, when it comes to rough mixes, the problem that we run into collectively as mixers a lot of times is that artists have listened to their rough mixes for so long that they're so attached to them, and we fight this war almost daily where they be like, oh, make it sound like the rough, to the point where I just tell them to master the rough. But a lot of times, it becomes a situation where you have to just explain to them like, look, you've been listening to something a certain way for a long time. So anything that I do that's different, you're going to perceive it as wrong, even though I'm listening to it for the first time and I've been doing this for a long time. Not trying to ego trip on anybody, but it's one of those things where we fight that battle. And so what I'll do is I'll listen to rough mixes and again, same with the references. I'll try to pinpoint, okay, that rough mix had a vibe, it had a feel. They're trying to maintain that feel. So then it's my job as a mixer to maintain the feel of what made them fall in love with that record or that rough mix, but still have it be a polished mix and not just a glorified rough mix.
I mean, so I've got a mix that I just did. The guy's on a vacation right now, and so he can't be here. So we're communicating over the phone, and he's going back and forth. He's listening to what I'm doing for him. He loves everything, but he says that the bass isn't hitting hard enough. And I tell him, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? What do you need? Let me help you out here. So I said, let me listen. What are you listening to, or what are you comparing it to? He gives me a name of the song. I listen to it, and I say, now you know that what I'm doing is hitting harder than this song. He's like, what you mean? I said, what you're hearing is the difference between the instruments in these two songs. So the kick in the one song that he was referencing is completely different than the kick that was used in the song that I was mixing, and was actually hitting harder. It's just that in the system he was referencing in, because he doesn't really he's listening on a phone, he's listening through over ear or the old Sony headphones. So he can't really tell what he's listening to, right? But regardless, through that, what he sent me, I was able to match that up and satisfy what he wanted. And still keep it so that it was still hitting harder than the original that he was actually referencing. But I needed that, you know what I mean, in order to make it work. Because there are times when we mix stuff for people that are out of town who can't make it here to Atlanta, and we need something so that the back and forth sometimes just doesn't work. So we need a reference. Yep.
Mike, on references, I know you got some stuff on references.
Yeah, I mean, well, I like a. I'm not as concerned about
his catalog.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about. I want it to sound like somebody says, well, like he was saying, well, I want mine to sound like this Rihanna song, because I mean, those comparisons never work, honestly. I mean, if you're trying to make your song sound like this other person and you didn't even write a song that's even like that. I've gotten people that'll give me a pop song and they're doing a trap music song. It's like, So you just like this song. That doesn't make, that shouldn't match, that shouldn't mean I match your song to this. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, you got to at least be, if you're going to mix a trap song, give me a trap song that you kind of, you know, I've had ones that are complete, so I don't really like to follow those too much. If there's a particular effect, like they're like, oh, well, I like the way that it did this stutter in here. Cool, I can listen to that. But if you're like, I want my song to sound like this song, I'm like, well, then you should write a song that's like that song. Other than that, but as far as other references, I do like the producer's reference, because a lot of times the producer doesn't come to the mix. A lot of times it'll be just the artist, and having the producer's idea of how he thought the music should sound is important, because a lot of times I might listen to it, and like I say, I'm listening to it for the first time in a different context. Maybe the string pad is not the main instrument, and I picked it as being the main instrument, right? So having the guy's reference of the producer saying, no, the horns were supposed to be the main part. So I can at least, I use it mainly for like level references. So I can start to kind of figure out, okay, they want this up. Okay, this snare of the 3 snares is the main snare. Little things like that, it makes it where I can kind of get it closer to what the producer's like perception of what he wanted it to sound like is. Not necessarily that I'm going to copy the EQs and stuff like that, because a lot of times that stuff is off. And the effects a lot of times are a little off. But I like to have the reference just for that kind of situation, so I can make sure that I'm working along the producer's ideas.
Go ahead.
When you're mixing, where do you prefer the vocals to come in? As in, or the dBs of the vocals? Because sometimes it could be in the yellow, but sometimes it could be in the green. What do you prefer when you're mixing?
I just want them to sound good. So if they're distorting, then yeah, that's a no-go. But as long as they sound good, what are our reference? Yeah,
I like them 1/2 to 3/4 on the meters.
Yeah.
Because if you make them louder while they're not distorting, I got to gain them all down so that when I start putting on compressors and effects and things like that, I'm not overloading the plugins. The biggest thing with a lot of people that they don't think about the next steps. Kind of like when people mix that don't think about mastering and they tend to mix too hot. And I got to start adding, like every time I got to add a plug-in or effect or whatever I got to do, I have to think about the gain stages going into that. A lot of people don't seem to care. I look at people's plugins, they're always slammed in the red on the inputs and things like that. All that stuff matters. So I like to, what I'll end up doing is, I don't necessarily change the volume, but I'll trim it down, or I'll clip gain it down, or whatever, if it's too hot. But I like them about 3/4. If they're down lower than that, it's probably a lot of noise involved. And then if they're above that, they're going to be clipping. And then for sure, when I put plugins on it, it's going to start distorting and stuff. So
Like on the track, what is 3/4?
I'm thinking about Protools meters, because everybody seems to work in Pro Tools, so I don't really know what colors it changes to. But if you look at the full meter, 3/4 is like right in here. You know what I'm saying? Like your halfway's here, about somewhere in between 1/2 and 3/4. Like somewhere in there. I don't really know what the numbers.
Pretty
end up
much
being,
like right,
the colors,
like
right?
where it's still green, but it's starting to fade into yellow.
Yeah, something roughly in that. That's where I kind of like them. In that general area. The thing with digital is that it's not as much like tape. I mean, a lot of people seem to have the tape mentality that never even use tape. That I got to print this on here all the way at the top. Well, that's tape. That's how you avoided tape noises. We would print hotter on tape, right? So you got more signal and less tape noise. That's the old school way and that never really changes. But the thing that people forget is that you're in digital. So once you got it in there, if you're in that 3/4, it's not a whole lot of difference between that and slam it all the way up to 0. Except that you're going to have the possibility of adding all this distortion, because it's digital. And once it's in there, you don't have tape hiss. So there's no reason to try to be eating up that additional little teeny bit of headroom for something, because you're not getting anything really out of it. And then you don't have any, and if you're able to get that at 0 without getting in the red, you're probably compressing too much anyway. You need to have some dynamics and let the mix engineer do the compressions and things that are necessary, because I don't just use one compressor. Sometimes I'll use up to 4 or 5 compressors on one track at different stages and steps. So I'm not
Will you
doing
automate
it.
it? You automate the compressors?
I just work at them at different levels on different pieces. Sometimes I'll automate them, but a lot of times it's just the way that I adjust where it grabs certain things. So it might not be compressing on some things, right? But it'll maybe compress on some others. I call it like step compression. So it just depends on what the song is and how the vocal sits as to whether I'll need to do that or not. And then sometimes I'll do it where I start compressing in groups. Once I start to move things into groups, into different subgroups and things like that, I'll maybe compress things on that. But if I had the thing all the way up in the red already, the vocal, then I can't really do a lot of that. I got to get it all the way down so I can start working my compression levels and schemes that I'm going to do. Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
I heard you just mention groups. Do you start mixing and then decide, I want to put that in a group, or do you put your tracks in and then already set them in groups before you start mixing?
Half and half. So I can look at some things and know I want them grouped, right? I want these hook pieces grouped, right? I want this. Okay, these strings are all doing the different things. Like there's a violin and there's another violin, and they're supposed to together play, and that's what creates the string pad or whatever. Now I might group that, and then I'm going to group all the music together, because eventually I'm going to have to do an instrumental and an acapella and all that. So I just want to be able to cut all that off real quick. And then as I'm working, I find out, this is in the wrong group. I'm gonna put it over here. oh, wait, I shouldn't put this in a group because that double doesn't do anything with anything else. Let me just put that over here. But the first thing I do is clean up and organize a session. I don't know what everybody, I don't know how Corey and
Yeah.
Luther do it, but cleaning and organizing is the first 30 minutes, and labeling. You know, I don't like everything in capital letters, so like little stuff like that bugs me. So it's like, I'll go in there and I rename, you named it all in capital letters, I may name it all exactly the same, but I'm gonna put it all in small letters so I can see all on the track. You know, it's like, well, I don't want it to say, this has got a title this long, you put it all in capitals, I see this much of it. So I put it all small, I can see it all. Little stuff like that, and that's just like OCD stuff that, you know, and then I'll start to get all my, organize it into like, okay, here's the music, okay, here are these pieces, here's these, you know, and I chop and I cut, and a lot of times people will give you Logic stuff where it's just all one long file, even though they didn't do anything at this part. I'll chop all that dead space out and kind of work. So that's a lot of the starting of it, and then I'll start figuring out the groups and stuff. I don't know how.
Do you guys want to talk about groups or move on to other questions?
We can move on. I mean,
I know you had a question in the back.
Is there a point where, like the amount of plugins that you use enough to like bring the quality of the music, or just is there plugin abuse?
I mean, it's really like, I can't say there's plugin abuse when you get to the stage that we're at. Like everything is intentional. Every plugin we put on there, we put on for a reason. So it's not like I've seen a lot of like younger engineers that just, you know, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience, and they'll throw a plugin on just because they saw someone else do it and they don't really know what it does. And then that's plugin abuse, in my opinion. But everything is intentional with what we do. So you might look at a session if I'm mixing all in the box. 'Cause I do both. I mix in the box and I also mix if I have an SSL or a board in front of me, I mix on the board. So if you look at some of my in the box mixes, it's gonna be a whole lot more plugins than if I have the SSL. So it just, and with what we do, everything has a purpose.
Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
Kind of moving away, like, you know, how we're all in the digital stuff now. What would you say is like the most important hardware to have for mixing, like, you know, what makes it?
Your converters.
What was that?
Your converters.
Converter?
Yeah. I mean, you once you're moving out of the digital realm out to the analog, because we use a head unit here, which is an ADD converter that takes the signal from the board, converts it back in, and we print that back to Pro Tools. And that adds a lot. And even just the converters in your I/O, you know what I mean? So if you're tracking and mixing or producing, and you're actually physically producing something and tracking that into your DAW, then your converters are going to actually affect the sound. Yep.
What you got?
Hardware
It's
wise?
different than that one, but
Nah, I mean,
that's
for
important.
you're talking about if we're just mixing like in the box or we're like.
Well, yeah, because I know like a lot of the hardware, that's what makes the studio environment, you know.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously hardware. If I'm thinking about a studio like this, the acoustics, the way the room is built, that plays a lot into mixing. Obviously, mixing in a tuned room. If I'm talking strictly like functionality, working through mixing, for me, like it's like UAD plugins. It's it's certain plugins that we all have our favorites or what we use or whatnot, and it's just a preference thing. Like there's no wrong or right. It's just what there's 1,000 different ways to do one thing. So a lot of that, me personally, is UAD plugins is what made me feel comfortable being able to go from analog to just being in the box or back and forth. It's the one thing that I said, okay, this is getting me close to the sound I love in analog. It's not quite all the way there. I still prefer analog sound, but it's close enough that I'm comfortable and confident with it.
I mean, hardware, the console.
Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, I don't know if you're asking if it's something you can buy, but I mean, it's like, to me, that's, I mean, it's like, I know you ain't gonna buy one of those and put it in your house, but that's the most important part of hardware for me, because I don't do in the box. I do on the board.
Yeah.
And I turn down stuff because it will be too many tracks and I'm not gonna do it in the box. So I'll be like, nah, I'm just not gonna mix this song. You got 100 music tracks in here. This is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. So, if I can't spread it out on the board and do what I want to do, I'm just not willing to really do the song. I'm not then, and that's just my style. Other people, they've adapted into working in the box because that's kind of where things have driven them, and I'm just like not really willing to do that. So, I work faster on the board than I do in the box. I mean, I've done in the box mixes and I can. It's not like I can't do them. It's just, even with the plugins and stuff, they're not the same. They don't sound the same. They don't act the same. So the console to me is that, and the speakers are the most important pieces in it, because if you can't hear and functionally do what you need to do on the mix, then there's just really no, to me, I'm not going to get where I need to go with it. I don't care what kind of plugins you got and all that stuff. So.
If you're not planning to do a master, where would you want your master fader to be when you bounce out?
So you're saying you're not planning on mastering the song?
Yeah, not planning to master the song.
Why are you mixing it then? Cause I only ask. I'm not being funny, but it's just like if you're, cause I run into this sometimes with artists where they'll pay me money to mix their record, but they don't spend a little bit extra money to get it mastered, and it's almost defeating the purpose of the mixing because the minute you take that song and play it up against a mastered song, it's not gonna stand up. So it's like there's no point in spending the money to mix it if you're not gonna master it. If you see what I'm saying.
I dig it. Oh, well, I guess as an artist myself, I guess we kind of put into a position where we have to put an output. So for me, I have my songs where I do master, you know what I mean, where I put on Spotify and everything like that. And those pretty much the songs that I own. But in order to keep, you know what I'm saying, keep my fan base fed, shoot it to YouTube or to SoundCloud.
Gotcha.
So I'll just mix it and then go from there. So that's why I'm saying, like, how do I mean, when it comes to when I'm mixing, when I'm going to the master fader, that's where I have the most trouble at because I don't really know where to put the master to keep it as clear and as loud as possible.
You put the master fader at 0, and then you adjust all your other levels to keep all your output exactly where it's supposed to be at the point you want. You don't need to move the master fader. Master fader should never be at anything but 0. It's there to make a fade. Other than that, all it is a subgroup. So it's, I mean, there's really no other point for a master fader. I don't see that's even on a console. I don't move it. It stays at 0. If it's overloading, then I got all these levels wrong over here. Adjust these. So you're not overloading that master fader. If you got to turn it down, you did something wrong over here. If you got to turn it up, you did something wrong over here. All it is just a subgroup that allows you to do a fade on your song. I mean, really, to me, that's all it really is functionally doing. As I'm sure other people might use it for other things, but that's how I use a master fader. And if you're changing your level of your master fader, you're changing your signal to noise ratios, which affects the mix. And if you have to change it, you did something wrong in your mix part that's getting to the master fader. Same thing we were talking about if your recording levels are too high and they're all up in the red. So that's your first starting point that something's going to be wrong.
Swear up and down that you should create a beat with the limiter already on the master track. I'm like,
While you're creating it? While you're creating the actual beat? Like you put a limiter on it and you're making the beat?
I mean,
With the limiter on?
Same thing I told him. But anyway. But I was just wanting you guys to clarify, just clarify the knowledge that I thought I had. So basically, you don't want to do anything with a limiter on until the very, really, you don't want the limiter to be in the very end.
I mean, the only time I could imagine would be like what he was explaining, like, hey, you're done with your mix, and now you just want to get the level to 0. So that, because a lot of times, like when you print a mix out, this is the whole point of mastering is when he talks about that, you'll get more of the information about why you need to do that. But when you print a mix, if I give you a mix and you go listen in your car, it's not going to be as loud as what you got on your CDs, right? That came from the store or wherever. So that's the mastering takes it up to that level, gets everything. Basically he brings it together and pulls it up to the right level properly. And he doesn't just sit there and throw an L2 on it, right? He does a lot of phase alignments and different things. It takes about 3 hours to master a song properly. So that's a lot more to bring it up to it. Now, what we were talking about is, you want to throw something on because you just kind of want to bring your level up and get it to a 0 point, right? So it'll be a little bit louder for everybody to hear. That's the only point I can see over where you put, and that's just a maximizer, which is kind of a limiting situation. But to put a limiter on something, and that's the bad thing is I've seen people do that in recording. I've looked at sessions before and I'm like, well, what is all these plugins? These things are all these compressors on all these vocals are slamming everything. So I take them off and everything's in the red because they tracked with all that crap on there that was bringing the levels down. They didn't even realize every one of their vocals was all distorted and in the red because they've had these limiters on everything while they're recording. Yeah, you don't need to record anything. I mean, when we record here, we go mic pre, compressor, de-esser if you choose, which I do. I always use a de-esser, and then right into the Pro Tools. That's it. And then we're not adding anything in Pro Tools. All my Pro Tools sessions when I'm tracking are empty. There's no plugins except I might have a subgroup of a reverb and a delay just for somebody to have some reference in their headphones. But there's nothing on any of the other tracks or anything like that. And I wouldn't put anything when you're making a beat. That sounds insane to put. Like, how are you going to know like where your levels are and whether anything's blended? Because now you're just crushing everything together. There's no dynamic range. That doesn't even sound musical. To me, that sounds horrible. I wouldn't know.
I unfortunately noticed that the reference monitors, like what you were saying, a lot of EQ, a lot of people like using EQs and compressors and things like that. How important is reference monitors?
Well, it's the monitors and the room you're in are extremely important because if you got a terrible room that is just it basically eats up all your bass. Let's say, all right, let's say you got a room which is actually it's the other way around. You got a big square room you're sitting in with no padding or nothing. You're making a beat and the stuff is just bouncing everywhere. So the problem with that is, and especially if you try to mix in that kind of an environment, you can't really hear what's going on in the room and on the actual song itself because the frequencies are bouncing all over the place. So having a properly tuned room is vitally important along with the monitor so that you can hear exactly what you're producing. Because it's kind of same kind of thing as I was saying earlier is that a lot of guys with the production tracks, while the mixes maybe not be terrible, they're half the time doing them on laptops and stuff like that, so they don't even have a proper reference of to be able to hear all the frequencies that are there. And so when you end up getting the track from them, it's got way too much bass because they're adding so much bass to try to get it. And half the time, I think that's honestly how distorted 808 showed up. Is from laptops and people pitched them so hard that it was all distorted and they couldn't even tell. And then it gets to the studio and then somebody was like, this is how, I don't know, this is my mental state of how I think it happened. But then then the people showed up and they're like, I can't get it over. I can't just deal with it. Just use it. Just use it like the way it is. And then all of a sudden now, that's why you got distorted 808s. And the same reason is why auto-tune is like, because somebody left it on something, and I don't know how to fix it. Just leave it like that, and then it's become something that everybody's like, "Oh, that's cool. I'll use that." I just feel like half the stuff in the world of music is mistakes, and which is fine. You get creative like that, but I mean, some of those things, it's like, well, you can't. A lot of these things you just can't hear right without proper. And if you're adding EQs and all these other things to it, you're a lot of times fixing something that probably wasn't broken. You're putting a Band-Aid over something that never really had an issue. Because you can't hear in the environment. So when I go in, that's why people are like, well, all I want you to do is like, I get this multiple times well, all I want you to do is just touch the mix up. It's already kind of where we want it. I'm like, well, I don't do that. I mean, I go to scratch and I start over and do it. And if you want to give me a reference, I can kind of work toward that. But the stuff that you have done outside of here is probably all wrong for what I need to do in a tuned environment where I can actually, hear what I'm doing. And so I'm not going to sit here and go through your 12 plugins to try to figure out what I need to change when I can just probably take all of them off, put one little EQ on there that I need and pan it over here and it's done. And it actually sounds the way it's supposed to sound. So that's a lot of the issue that I get from when people are trying to do something in an improper room with improper monitors on. What you guys got on monitors?
No, I mean you got to be able to hear it. If you can't hear it, you can't tweak it. That's always what I always we go by, because especially with engineers, because our ears are trained to be able to hear things, and so when, like he was referring to, when you're in a room that's not acoustically right and you're listening for things, you're overcompensating for something that you're not hearing. When in reality, when that translates to the car or somewhere else, then it's like, oh dang, there's too much bass here. But you were in a room that was bass light or you see what I'm saying? So it's crucial.
Yeah, same thing. I when I first got here, I was using a pair of Yamahas, small ones. Y'all just make fun of me about my little monitors, but I had to actually they're cute. I had to get a sub in order to really use them for reference when I was mixing. And eventually, I decided to take those back home and just use the monitors that Mike uses, our Genelecs that we have here, and because of that, my mixes have gotten better, and I'm able to hear a lot more. So very important.
And I think too with monitors is that you need to know what your mind, like you use NS10s.
Right.
I do not. I don't have anything against NS10s. I just don't particularly like the way that they sound when I'm mixing. Right. So I use Genelecs. He doesn't like the Genelecs because they got more bottom, and he's used to mixing with the more mid range of the NS10s. Right. So it's not necessarily this monitor's bad, that monitor's bad. It's more of know your monitor. Mm-hmm. Right. So when you listen to something, you know how it sounds in your car. Right. And then you put it on. Like I listen to Dr. Dre. Right. Number 4 off of what?
Chronic
2000.
Yeah.
So that's my reference. That's my reference
Yeah.
mix always. Right. So every time I go into a room and I need to hear what does this room sound like, I use that because I know how the snare sounds, the kick sounds on that particular track. So that's what you need to be able to do. Is that when you're working in an area that you should be able to, the area you're working in should all sound consistent, right? And you may have to tweak your monitors a little bit, adjust where they sit, adjust like if they got EQ settings on, maybe you need to roll some bass off your monitors, depending on which room they're in. You should have a reference mix that you know. Can't. I mean, if you constantly change your reference mix, it's not a reference mix, right? You have to have the same mix that you take in different places so that you know, oh, okay, this is how it should sound. I need to make some little adjustments in here to make these monitors fit to what the sound's supposed to sound like. And you can, like I say, there's EQs and stuff on the back of like switches and stuff on a lot of speakers that you can adjust. Sometimes you can just move them away. Sometimes you can just add some padding, put some padding behind you, and that'll maybe absorb up some of that stuff that's slapping around, and it'll start to make that record sound like what you're used to. And then you can like, okay, now I can make a good mix in here.
We have time for maybe one or two.
Just a quick question. What's your input on producers that send their beats off to get mixed by engineers as opposed to them doing it themselves? Because I go back and forth with some other producers and they be like, nah, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, you can do it yourself. What's your input on that? Or have you seen a producer's career actually elevate from doing that?
Kinda wanna get in on that?
So you mean like you talking about like just a beat, or you talking about like they a song was recorded and they're mixing the song, just the beat? It's really these days it's a preference thing because I know producers that don't want to give up their multi-tracks, and so they'll be like, well, I'm gonna mix this how I want it, and I'm gonna send you a 2-track, and you're gonna have to make that 2-track work, and we have to make it work. We just sometimes me personally, that's not. I wouldn't recommend going that route because, like we talked about earlier, they're mixing their beats without vocals, and so once we get it, we have to fit vocals in it. Then it's a challenge on us, and it's not as. It doesn't come out as good as it could. It doesn't reach its full potential sonically. So it's really a preference thing. Like I said, some producers just don't want anyone to touch their stuff because they don't want to give up 2 tracks. They're afraid, or they don't want to give up the track outs because they're afraid someone's going to steal their sounds or whatnot. So it's really on them. I wouldn't recommend it because if you're at that point where you're okay, unless you're a dope mixer like Dr. Dre or like DJ Quick or some of these other producers that are also dope at mixing, I would tend to go with the people that actually mix records to send their beats to.
So you saying you will send them to get
Yeah, I mean, I would because it's just like everyone has their specialty. It's just like if you have a foot injury, you're not gonna go see a cardiologist. You're gonna go see you see what I'm saying? So it's that type of thing. So my thing is like, okay, the producer, like I said, unless he has expertise in the other thing, just stick to what he knows, and then obviously give him within reason. But that's just my preference. What I would.
Yeah. I mean, it's a risk reward type thing. You know what I'm saying? If you're selling a beat for $50, then you don't want to pay me $250 to mix it. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. But if you're selling tracks to major labels, like you've got placements and major placements, and you're just for some reason things just aren't translating well, then yeah, you might want to do that. Yeah.
One last question. Last question back there.
In what ways do you guys prepare for different environments? Do you guys do a mix for a live show, a mix for radio, a mix for movie score? Do you do a different mix for each environment?
So when we mix the record, and then we print the different versions for that. So here, if it's a hip hop record and there's cursing, then there's going to be 7 passes: main, show, acapella, instrumental, and then the clean version of the first 3, right? And people will choose. You know what I'm saying? Some people don't really want to be up on stage without a crutch, so they will use their main version. But we do a show version that pulls out your lead vocal so you can actually showcase who you are. You know what I mean?
And then also to piggyback on that too, a lot of times we'll also, if, upon request, we'll provide what we call stems, where like sometimes where if an artist is going on tour and they're gonna have a live band playing, sometimes they might want certain stems that we send them of the mix. So it might be like, oh, well, just I need a drum stem and a bass stem and a guitar stem all separate so that they can adjust those levels at the show as they see fit. So but that's all provided upon request. We don't, it's not we're not sitting there printing thousands of stems at every mix.
Round of applause for the mix engineers.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Round of applause for Kurt and Kenny. So just to jump right into it to save time, we had a good question earlier. Do you want to repeat the question you had about the loudness and stuff?
Kenny heard it.
You heard it. Do you want to just go in on it?
Yeah, who asked that?
Right here.
Okay, got you. I think it was what, like the Loudness Wars, something like that. So actually my take on it, matter of fact, just recently, like last night, and actually like 3 times this week, I actually got a lot of tracks in that I had to reject for mastering. So what was happening is the same thing like you guys just kind of discussing. The producer gave the artist a track that was just crazy loud. The mix engineer got it, had to turn it down, then turned it back up, and then they sent all the stuff over to me, right? So I have no headroom to do anything with this stuff. And believe it or not, if I could play the song for you guys, it is distorted as hell. So what happens, let's just say you mix it at your own, studio, right? The problem is if you turn the volumes up loud, the speakers are compressing, and you can't hear the distortion. So to them, they're just jamming out, right? Volume's cranked, nobody hears distortion. On my end, when I pop it in, it was lit. No, let me do this. You hear? It was just like that, literally. And they say, well, how come you can't master it? What the hell do you mean? You know what I mean? So, but to answer your question about like the loudness wars, yeah, the things are just getting louder and louder and louder.
And worse.
And worse and worse. This stuff is sounding horrible. And what's happening is, I want to say is, let's just say a big producer didn't get something recorded right, didn't get it mixed right, wasn't mastered correctly, but they're big artists, and they just put it out. Now all of a sudden it's a plague, and everybody says, oh, well, shit, he did it. That song's out of here. Mine sounds just like that. It must be right. But the problem is they're big artists. Their fans bought into it. But now if you talk to the fans one-on-one, right, they're going to say, well, man, I bought this song, so having this thing sound like shit in my car. You know, but to the public that's not talking to each other is so-and-so, that was a big record. And then we keep following that lead. You know, so it's actually good you was asking that question. So that's the thing that's going across the board that all of us engineers talk about. Yeah.
How does an organization stand up to that? Are there things that you guys do here that you try to preserve as far as quality wise?
Yeah, it's called rejected. Yeah. I mean, I know that sounds brutal, but you have to remember too, even if I reject a song, I at least try to get in touch with the artist or that engineer and go, hey, I need some help. Can you pull all this stuff off this master bus? Like Mike was just saying, let me help you. You know what I mean? Help me help you. So it's one of those type of deals. So it's not something where I just say, well, I just reject this, forget your song. It's not like that. It's more of, I know how to help you make yourself sound better.
Yeah, one of the things we started doing last month, which was really successful with Kenny. Kenny's our mastering engineer, so we only got one mastering engineer, our chief mastering engineer. But one of the disconnects, you know, back in the old days or older days, you know, there was always a relationship between the mix engineer and the mastering engineer that maybe the public and the labels and the artists didn't even realize was going on. Where if a mix engineer sent something to the mastering engineer and if something was wrong, he would just contact them. A lot of times our mix engineers used to call the mastering engineer and be like, did you get it? Is everything straight? Blah, blah, blah. And then they go on. Nowadays, you know, there aren't a lot of credits everywhere. So Kenny probably don't even know who's mixing the records that we doing. And we can't call them. And well, even if we do call them, if we call the label and figure out who mixed it and get a hold of the mix engineer, there's no relationship there. So now they're getting a phone call from this dude who they probably don't even know that's mastering their record, and he talking about something's wrong with it, can you change this for me? And their response is, well, my client approved it, I ain't changing shit, and I already got paid, blah, blah, blah. So we set up a program here, we do it every First Fridays, called First Fridays with Kenny Mix, and we're going through our track listing form, contacting the people at the labels, finding out who's mixing these songs and reaching out to these mix engineers and inviting them to come sit in with Kenny for 2 hours so we can pull up some of their songs in so they can actually hear it in a tuned room. And then he can kind of, actually it was interesting, you know, the approach he took on the first one was he put the record up and he just asked them what they play hearing instead of talking at them. And everybody in the room was like, oh shit, I can hear this or I can hear that. And it was a cool thing. So what we're trying to do is just establish a relationship with you all, if you guys are mixing at home and other places, with our mastering engineer so that you can have somebody to call if you got a question. You know what I mean? So that's one of the interesting things is that with all this is so-called social media, it's almost anti-social because it's killing all the relationships between the people making the music. The artists ain't in the same place. The producers ain't never there. They don't know who mixing their records, and they definitely don't know who mastering it. So doing things like this, we trying to bring all of that back. So that's one of the things we have to do is that we have to say no and be the person that is setting the standard instead of like everybody else just letting it go by and taking the money. We just say we can't do this record. We try to fix it if we can, just like the mix engineers, they'll call people and ask them, but if we can't, then we just don't do it.
Go ahead.
All right, two questions. All right, first question was regarding what he was talking about.
Hey, real quick, I do want to do this because one of the things that was interesting when we started doing mastering, I think Kenny's been here about 9 years, and the incredible thing was, I think one of our first clients was Sam Sneed. He used to work with Dr. Dre and them. And and when he came, what we did is we let people come to the mastering session, and he had been in the game about 15 years, and I was surprised that he had never been to a mastering session. And then as we started doing it, I was surprised by the number of people who didn't know what it was but never even been to it. So in this room, just real quick, anybody ever been to a mastering session or met their mastering engineer? Raise your hand. And that's what we trying to fix,
Wow, 3 people.
right? It's the last dude that's hearing your record and y'all don't know him.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question you was talking about, he was talking about the loudness. Okay, so the loudness factor. What you've been in the industry, what you guys working with big artists and stuff like that. As a producer and as a musician, I don't want to compete with that. You know what I'm saying? Making original tracks from scratch. I don't want to compete with loudness all the time. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just not music. It don't sound good.
Right.
So as a producer, do you feel that the track that I'm on, just stay true with it because music it's coming back. You know how it goes. Everything comes around, and we can already see the trend kind of going back. So I need to kind of just stay where I'm at, or should I just start distorting my 808s like here, right here?
Definitely don't do that. It's gonna sound brutal, guys, when I say this, but a lot of the problems that we see with a lot of really, really bad sounding stuff is on the urban side. You know what I mean? My other clients, they don't sound like that. That stuff sounds good. You know what I mean? So you just got to remember this. The loudness war thing, that really only is relevant in the clubs. All right, so then let me break that down a little bit like this. The music industry, I mean the whole music industry, doesn't matter whether it's a commercial studio, your home studio, clubs, you know, anything that's related to music, you know what I mean, Guitar Center, whatever, that only makes up 6% of the buying market. 6%. So if you're doing your music specifically only in the goal of saying, I got to turn up at this club, you're marketing to 6%. So we put that into a bigger perspective, right? Let's just say we're at the New Georgia Dome. That means that basically you're only doing your music for the people that's sitting on the damn bench. And my other clients are doing the music for the people all around the whole stadium. You know what I mean? So now with the loudness thing that's going on, believe it or not, at the radio stations, if I take a song, let's say we got a song that's like mad loud. I'm doing this, I'm representing like a waveform out of Pro Tools or whatever, right? So this says like just mad loud. And then you have another one that's mastered. It may be like this loud in comparison, right? But once it hits the radio station, it hits what's called an or band compressor. That or band compressor is going to take the lower file, is already at the right volumes, and it's just going to say, okay, this is correct. But it's going to take this one and turn it down. So now the master sounds big and full, and the loud one sounds squashed and distorted. You know what I mean? So the loudest thing is really only for the clubs. And then you take that a step further. If you're making it for the clubs, there's nothing about a club that says sound quality. Everything's in mono. You go in and everything's loud as hell. You know what I mean? Then a lot of times, like sometimes we get kicked back like, yo, my song wasn't hitting as loud as whatever that was at the club. What was the song? It was so-and-so. I go, oh, well, that's cool because I did that. You know what I mean? So now the difference is I've got one artist that had the turned up loud producer did this and everybody squashed it, do my own thing. You had another independent artist that went through the proper steps and everything sounds bigger and fuller. That's my biggest take on like the loudness, you know what I mean? It's really unnecessary, but we're kind of like zombies. Gotta do what everybody else is doing.
where, went to a professional studio, got it tracked out, got a industry standard mixing engineer, got it mixed, then got it mastered. I took it to Club Cheetah, it went off, went to Follies, it went off, everything was good. But then when I brought it to Hot 107.9, the guy was like, it's too loud, right? Now granted, I didn't hear any distortion or anything like that, but I guess he was looking at the meter and he had to have the meter. He said it was too loud, so he had to put the meter down in order to play it on the speakers. Now, how am I supposed to know if it's too loud for the
Well,
radio?
because it's the problem is there's a plague of everybody saying that they do recording, mixing, and mastering, which is fine, but it's also the difference of just imagine if you guys put this in your head. Just imagine if you could go and buy the same tools as a doctor, and then your mom needs brain surgery, and I go, man, fuck Emory, cuz I got you. I got the same tools, man. I got this, that. Or you know how to use it? Nah, I just got them twerk around in there till I got them fix it. You know what I mean? It's the same analogy. So there are a lot of cats, and I record, I mix, I master, whatever. But then the problem is, like Kirk just asked you guys, how many guys have actually been to a mastering session? Right? It was only 3 people. So there's no way, if you've never been with a doctor that did brain surgery, you had the same stuff, how can you say, oh shit, I do brain surgery? You know what I mean? So that's the problem. That's the disconnect. So I get it. There are, a lot of cats say, yo, I record, I mix, I master. But just like you ran into, the radio station is saying, yo, this is not right. And that's because with mastering, everything is set up by standards. There's real standards where television, post-production, the radios, your cars, Bluetooth, your phone, everything is calibrated. And these big corporations set the calibrations. So a car plays at this level. Anything beyond that, it's gonna start compressing and turning stuff down and trying to fix it. Radio station, same thing, a little Bluetooth, same thing. That's why you can buy a little bit that has a little Bluetooth and pop in a record and it still sounds correct because the standards have to be there. And if the room isn't calibrated like that, the gear isn't calibrated like that, and the speakers aren't calibrated like that, and then you have a master engineer that doesn't even know the standards. It's like there were audiobooks, everything. And there's no way you can set it correctly. You can make it loud, you know what I mean? You can make it just loud as hell in your room, but the standards aren't there.
Yeah, I think if you were going to the lowest common, the difference is he could show you. It ain't no guessing. He got a sound meter in his room. When he's done mastering your song, he's sitting on the desk and hit play, and you can read and see. You can read up and figure out what the standard is supposed to be. Then he's gonna measure it and make sure that that's what it is. And so, like even some of the other stuff that we got going on here, my biggest thing is to show you, or our biggest thing is to show you. It ain't no hype. So it's kind of like with all the paperwork and the stuff with the monetization. There ain't a situation where we do something and it just went off into a black hole. We literally gonna send you a package with the confirmation so that you know that it's been done. And so, like I keep saying, the biggest thing here is that if you never did your record right all the way through, like if you never had a real producer track it out, if you never went to a real recording session with a professional engineer, and you never had it mixed on the board or whatever they're doing with a reel and mastered, how can you know what's not right? You have no point of reference. So now, if you came here or went to a studio or sat in with Kenny and you sat in there and mastered your record, the next time somebody go to master your record, if you go to their studio and it don't look like his, now you know what a real mastering room looks like, right? So you can just say, this bullshit, I ain't working here. But if you don't know, you can't call that. You just hoping that it's right. They should be able to show you that your shit is right. You know what I mean? So like the cool thing about here is that we offer a bunch of consultations where I'm begging people that, hey, you got a dude that's mixing your song. I get it. You can't afford to work here. You just paying him $200. But if you got to do 2 records, 10 records, that's $2,000. Why don't you let him do one of your records, pay $75 for a consultation with him or one of the engineers and let him check it and see if his shit is right before you go and do all 12 wrong. Then you got to come back here. So we have programs and things like that where I was telling people upstairs, we do our core business on one hand, record, mix, master, distribution, and paperwork. But everything else is geared up where we reaching out to you guys, trying to establish a relationship. Because for me, I realize that a lot of this is a dream for people, and I just hate to see people's dreams get crushed by running into crooks and people that be doing shit wrong. Music industry ain't that hard if you get the right people working on your stuff. But if y'all run into that crook and he take your money and he don't do what he's supposed to, then and y'all gonna go get the job at UPS, right? You don't want to deal with it no more. So, you know, the goal is, you know, the reoccurring thing that you'll hear me saying is establish a relationship with a professional. And if y'all don't know any professionals in the music industry, we have a bunch of them that work here. So you want to establish a relationship with us. It doesn't cost you nothing. We've been here 22 years. We ain't trying to take your money. It doesn't cost. I'm here Monday through Friday. They joke. I'm here from about 10:30 to 2:30. My consultations are free. So if you want to sit down and talk to me, it doesn't cost you anything. You just call up here and set up an appointment, and then we can kind of point you in the right direction. I think information is the biggest thing that you guys are lacking, and that's why y'all here on a Saturday. Y'all knew these engineers was going to get here, and y'all was trying to get some game, right? All right, so stay plugged in. Yeah.
I had a comment and a question. You were saying about distortion of radio. I remember when I worked at Clear Channel in Macon, we got the first White Tee single, and it was completely loud, so we had to bring it down. So when they actually played it on the radio, it didn't peak, but it sounds distorted as heck. So I actually finally know what we were talking about with that. But the question I had was that a little while back, DJ Taz, when his single "That's Right" first came out, it had no bass, nothing, and they put that on out. And I asked him, I was like, "Why does it sound like that?" He said, "That's the first master we got, and the labels wanted it really quickly, but when they came out with the video, the bass was in there." So I was going to ask you, have you ever had it to where like the label was like the artist was cut and dry, like I need this by tomorrow, and you couldn't be able to give it to him?
You say this real quick on that. We had a situation similar with Scooter when he had that his first single. I forgot the name of it. Yeah, he didn't have no drum, no bass on it, and that record was going around blowing up. And then I think Corey came back in and added the low end to it, and Kenny mastered it, and we serviced it to radio. So it kind of switched. So for people out there, that's a popular record. If you want to hear, listen to the earlier version, and it was nothing that never moved your speaker or nothing, and they redid it. And then a lot of times we have that happen where a record will take off in the streets, and then the artist will get signed, and then the label will come back in and say, we need it remixed and remastered. And Kenny can talk about this. Maybe the thing that you don't notice that's happening behind the scenes when they remastering that record, that's when they putting their codes on it so they can own that record. That other record is just out there, and it ain't nothing on it. It's just running out there. They can't really monetize that or nothing or claim it because they didn't code it properly and register it. So a lot of times when you hear stuff getting redone, it's twofold, sonically, and then two, they want to put their ownership on there with these ISRCs and UPC codes and register them so that if they start playing everywhere that the label can make it. So sometimes you'll see a label say, hey, we resurfacing this record, don't play the old one. They don't want the old one paid because they ain't making money off of it. So they'll bring it back in and get it redone.
Just by a show of hands, how many people know what an ISRC code is? So, Kenny, let's talk about the ISRC code and how to actually like make money, how to get paid for your music.
Got you. Your ISRC code, believe it or not, guys, that code has been around since like tape and vinyl records. If you guys ever looked at, like a vinyl record, you know how it has a little circle in it that sits on that spindle? If you look around the edges of it, you'll see it looks like somebody had like a little Sharpie knife and cut little alphabets and letters in it. So those are codes that have been in the music industry like forever, right? It's International Standard Recording Code. But with that particular code, let me say this first to try to help make some sense. You guys remember when Prince was on the radio, on TV, like some years back, and he had cut slave in the side of his hair, shaving it said slave. He said he didn't own the rights to his masters. And I was just having a discussion with a guy last night about the same topic where he thought that owning your masters meant the CD that I gave to him physically and put in his hand. That's not owning your masters. Owning your masters is basically whoever owns that code owns that master. right? So with that ISRC code, that code is actually embedded into the metadata of your song. So it's embedded in your song, right? And then once it's embedded, then that code is actually registered back to your company, right? So now, when that song gets on the radio, whether it's streamed online or so forth, you guys will start seeing that residual money show up. Without that, you don't see it show up.
So no code, no money.
No code,
and
no
then,
money.
and then the thing you got to realize is that it's I always say it's two different arenas. It's people just doing stuff bootleg and people doing it for real. So if your song is just on some bootleg station, maybe you don't get anything. But if it make it to Turner, the code is structured so that they can figure out who owns it. So the way it's set up is that the first three digits of the code is the country. So now they can figure out where is this artist from, what country is he from. And then the next two records are the year that it was. No, the next three codes belong to you. So that's the only thing on it that belongs. So if it's a PWR, then they can go to say, oh, this PWR belongs to this label Patchwerk. So now they know they're in the United States and it's this country. Then the next digits are the year that the song was created, that it was attached to it. So they can be like, oh, this was made in 1998. And then the last digit is for the owner, where you catalog what song that is. So they can just literally say, hey, I got this code, and you can figure out what the record is. So, it's important. It's like we always just tell people, it's like a social security number for your song. And if you're going out there working for somebody that's hustling and you're not getting taxes paid out, it's not a benefit for you later on in life. You're not going to get social security. You're not going to get employment. You're going to get everything you get up front. It's the same thing with your song. If you don't code it, you might can sell it and get something right away, but the residuals, the back end money ain't never gonna come to you. And they just got like the black box where they act like they can't figure out who this money belongs to.
Right.
They just put it all in there. The list is probably about 300 pages of people that they owe money to that they act like they can't find. So if one letter in your name is wrong and they got $5,000 for you, I can't find Kitty Mix because he got 2 X's and mine say 1. And that's because the artist submitted it wrong, and they just got billions of dollars sitting in the box that they acting like they can't find us because the stuff ain't taken care of.
So I code my song. Cool. I get it from Kenny. What else do I need to do though?
Real quick, Luke, the thing I think too that people are getting to see is like my analogy is like when you go to the grocery store and you see those gift cards sitting in the front, right? Me, I used to be like, I'm gonna steal them. Right? But if you steal them, they don't have no value, right? Because you don't register them. So getting the code is the first thing, but if he embeds the code and then you don't register it, say with a company like Nielsen, now you just got a dumb number. It's not in a database, so it doesn't mean anything. So a lot of people keep thinking that just because they got the code, they straight. But if you don't register it, it's not tied to a database, so it doesn't mean anything. So getting it is one thing. Embedding them into the metadata is the next, and then the next thing is actually registering them so that if it jumps off, like that's how you chart on the Billboard charts and stuff because you registered.
Right.
If you don't have your stuff in the system and you sell 1 million copies, it doesn't mean anything.
Right, and you're actually invisible to the labels. So I see a lot of times, like kind of what Kurt is saying, I see a lot of times where somebody say, well, I did my own songs, I'm recording, mix, master myself. I've been selling out and got my stuff working everywhere, social media, the whole shebang, right? You have a lot of numbers out there, but until that stuff is monetized and registered, you're invisible to a label. You can go to Sony today and go, yo, I got 50 million followers, I got this, I got that, I'm sold out, whatever. They're gonna pop on the computer and go, I don't see you. We don't care about all your trucks that you sold or whatever you did. We don't see you. And so that's what is really, really important. That is the music industry.
And then you have to be registered through a PRO as well, right? Before anything, or can you where does the money come from? I got the code, metadata, registered. Now where does the money come from?
Like you said, the pro or the sound is a sound exchange? Sound exchange. So basically the performance rights organizations, they've been around forever, and anything performed publicly, they collect money for you. So all these clubs and restaurants and grocery stores and stadiums that play music, they pay a fee for that. And you get a part of that based on how many times your song is played. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm thinking their technology wasn't up to date to monetize all of the digital radio stations like satellite and internet, and that's where Sound Exchange came in. They filled the gap, and they collect money from those stations. So the traditional ones, and you know, the weird thing about it, yeah, you can be registered with the PRO, but as an independent artist, what's the chances of your song being on V103? Right? It may happen on the digital stuff first. So that Sound Exchange is where a lot of people getting their money first, because you can get on a satellite station, internet radio station, or do some streaming. So the PROs are big, and that's cool, but they doing public performance rights. You gonna probably start making money off the internet or streaming or digital stuff first. So you want to do
So does
the
like
Sound
so
Exchange.
is Spotify Sound Exchange, YouTube? That's all Sound
Yeah,
Exchange.
that's digital.
Okay.
Yep.
And you would just make an account on that or something.
Yeah, we offer that service too. But yeah, we would set you up with an account, give you a username and password, and then every time you create a record, you want to put it in the system. You just never know what's gonna pop off. And
Get the IRC code. I think TuneCore issues it out, but that's sufficient enough, or you just
you can go. There's a site, usisrc.org, and they have a list of ISRC managers that are on there. And so if you don't want to manage your own code and keep it with your catalog, you can go with the manager. That's what we are. The thing when we deal with the stuff that comes from TuneCore, the only issue that I have is that they like to issue out the ISRCs after you submit the song, which that doesn't allow Kenny to embed it into the metadata, and that's ass backwards to me. You should have the code first and give it to your mastering engineer so he can embed it and register it. You shouldn't have to wait till the song is mastered, then they give you a code, because now you can't embed it. And when Kenny masters the song, he's going to give you a physical CD that has codes in it, so when you get it duplicated, your codes follow it. He's also going to send you a WAV file and an MP3 that have your codes on it that people can't erase. So we always tell people, don't take the CD, put it in iTunes or something and rip it, because now you just deleted all the codes.
Right.
Use the digital ones that Kenny got you, because they're going to sound better and they have the codes embedded in it. But if you get the code afterwards, it can't never get embedded into your song, right?
Right.
so the mastering engineer has to put the code into the song.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's weird enough, it's on one of my sleeves. Yeah, it says Chief Master Engineer. There's only 2 of us in the whole state of Georgia. And what that basically means is that I'm one of the guys that can officially make the labels their money. So in other words, we're damn near like a Sony here. It's just that we don't sign artists, but we know how to get you out there like that. Because I also have I don't have artists myself, but I have some friend clients, whatever, that we've been working with, and some of them are in the millions, and they're unsigned. Literally making millions, unsigned. Some of them not in the clubs, not on the radio stations, not on World Star, any of that. But they have huge pockets, and it's because they did the business side correctly. You know what I mean? So that's mad important. And just like how Kurt said, I had this issue last night, to where a guy had his songs, that I finished mastering, whatever. Hits me, says, "Yo, Kenny, I took the radio station and said it doesn't sound right. This is horrible. Da da da. Just whatever." I was like, "Dude, well, bring it here. What do you have? Because I don't see why this song sounds bad, right?" But I get the song. Come to find out, is because he took what I had, put into his computer, and whatever it went through his computer had EQs and all, what other stuff on it. Changed everything, and it erased the codes. So I told him, I said, if that radio station had accepted that CD and you don't have codes on it, and to legally play anything on the radio station, it has to have codes. So if you don't have the codes, where the codes gonna come from? Just take a wild guess. You know what I mean?
Put my own code on there and collect.
Right.
Any of you guys all have YouTube pages? Okay, cool. Great way to make money.
Yeah.
And those videos, as Kenny say, they get coded as well. And
That's how they block it. That's how if you put
well, it's 2 things that you got to realize. What I have to explain to clients about the YouTube is that when we say we can monetize your YouTube and your Sound Cloud page, is that you too can monetize your YouTube page, but you only gonna get paid when people come to your channel. But if WorldStar jack your video and put it on your channel, if you don't know how to put a claim on it, you're not going to get paid from it. So the difference is we partner with a company that monetizes anything. So with stuff taken down, that was the old model, and you can still use it. That if I put up a Jay-Z record on my page and get 3 million hits, they have the technology where he can put a claim on it and make money off of my page. Or he can say, I don't want it. I want everybody to come to Tidal. So if anybody posts my stuff, take it down. Nowadays, most people let you put it up. So you may have a video that you did. You ain't getting no money from YouTube and you keep seeing commercials on it. Well, it's probably because you got a Nike logo or a Tupac record playing in the background and they went in and put a claim on your page and they making money off of you. So you can be doing the same thing. So when you're shooting your videos, for all these producers and artists, you want to make sure the thumbprint that people really can collect on is the music. So you want to put your music in the background, and if you register it and get all the codes and stuff properly, then if anybody else reposts it and stuff like that, then you can be making money off of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's that company that you were saying that you team up with?
It's called StreamCut.
Streamcut?
Yep. Yep.
Does it apply to Instagram too?
No, nope. They ain't figured out the Instagram stuff.
So,
Yeah.
so can I bring a mastered record to you and you embed it with the IRC code?
That's illegal.
It's illegal. I mean, it's my mastered records.
Illegal.
Yeah, Kenny don't embed songs that he doesn't master. Right. So you would, like, if that happened to us, the instructions, like if you called up there and say, hey, I got this song mastered at Blue Record Studios and I need to get codes on it, then we would point you back to your mastering engineer. But 6 out of 10 times, your mastering engineer can't do it because he ain't real. It ain't for real. So you really,
It's really too cheap.
well, I'm just saying that if that's a service that they offer, and they should be able to do it. So if we had a client that didn't get codes and he came back and was like, hey, I mastered this song, a year ago, and now I want to put codes on it, and it would go to Kenny, he would pull it up, he has the tools to embed it, and then we would do it. So that's a service that your mastering engineer should do it. And if your mastering engineer can't do that, then that ought to be an indicator that you may not want to get the next record mastered there.
Right.
Okay,
So
can I bring the file that he mixed to you and you remaster it and put the codes in it?
right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's happening is I just like to try to break it down a little bit why that's actually a super illegal thing. It's sort of like the analogy that Kurt and I go rob a bank, but I'm just a driver. And then he hops in my car. I'm going down too, right? So what happens legally, especially as a chief master engineer, legally, let's say some big producer produced this record, right? You didn't pay him, but now we got codes on it, and you're making money. I just helped you rob the bank. So in some instances, you got some artists making millions of dollars. So if I just helped you take millions from the label or somebody else, or thousands from this producer, dude, I just helped you rob the bank. So legally, the contracts I'm in as a chief master engineer, I'm doing fed time under the jail. You know what I mean?
And then the thing too, I think you gotta realize that I always tell people around here we don't cheat. So we don't put, y'all met our staff assistants, you met our tracking engineers or whatever. And like I always tell people when they ask for advice on doing their studio and they trying to cut corners, I feel like I'm the wrong person because I don't know how to cheat. So just because it can be done doesn't mean we gonna do it. You can go to somebody else that say they're a mastering engineer, they'll probably do it. But here, it just ain't worth the risk to be cutting corners. So like for us, even in the studio, we get people that have these cracked plugins and stuff like that. We pay for all our plugins. It ain't worth the risk to be putting something illegally on our system and stuff like that. So there's ways around it, and you may see people doing it, but it doesn't make it right. It's like, always people be like, hey, I got a barcode that I used it on something else. Can I use it on this? Can you do it? Yeah. If you want them to scan your code, you can go take the barcode off of this water and put it on your song. And every time somebody buy your song, essentially gonna get the credit for it. It doesn't make it right. So it could be done, but it doesn't make it right. And I think that one of the issues that people have is that it kind of costs money to do stuff right. And then they be looking like, man, I did this record and it didn't work. But when that one record do work and you didn't do it right, you're gonna be looking at your ass like, damn, I should have just spent this extra $150 and do this shit right, because now you can't catch that record. So you don't know which one is gonna be, so you kind of gotta play the odds and do them all right. You know what I mean?
We have time for like one or two more questions.
producer, do you think we should get the codes before we, like, basically, should we go through someone like you in the very end, like, before we try to shop?
It doesn't matter. You can get the codes. It's just more so, like I always say, the only thing we doing is everything that we do for admin, we tell you what we doing. And you can do it yourself. We probably marked it up about 35%. So you can do it on your own. We're going to give you the cheat codes. The thing that we do is, even with the studio, is just we providing customer service. So now we're going to manage that code. We're going to keep track of it. Basically, you got somebody to cuss out if something go wrong. You do it on your own, you know, that's on you. You really got to keep track of it. Of this particular codes goes with this song, and I did it in this year and stuff like that. So even with our digital distribution, people keep asking what's the difference. We putting the song in the same place as Empire, as TuneCore, as CD Baby. The difference is you can come up here and talk to us. So everything that we do, it may be other people offering, but we think the thing that makes us stand apart are our people and the commitment to customer service, where y'all can come here and have a relationship with us. All that hype shit is hype. Like, you know what I mean? We ain't about to do all that hype stuff. We just gonna do the work. So if you want the work done, then, you know, you can come here and get it done. And if you're going somewhere that's good, then that's great. We support them too. If you come in here with that bullshit, somebody gonna tell you. You know what I mean? It ain't no hate or nothing like that, but we just gonna say it's easier just to tell the truth and keep it moving. And so it's like, man, if y'all trying to do music and you really want to do it, give yourself an opportunity to be successful. Work with a professional that's all that they do. None of these engineers got any other jobs, man. They sit up here and dream about music all goddamn day. You know what I mean? They ain't working at the post office and coming over here afterwards tired. This is what they do for a living. They professionals. And that's what we always try to draw the line between what's professional and not. If it's a professional, then they do it full time. That's all that they do. If they doing something else, then it's probably a hobby. So you want to make sure you guys are working with professionals.
Yeah. Then let me say just one little bit thing too about codes, something to think about. I'm not even gonna name a company names or whatever, but sometimes you can do a record, send it to a company, and then they say, yeah, you know, we'll provide you with the code or whatever, right? So just, you know, you guys just do a little bit of homework, you know what I mean? A little bit of studying on it, you know what I mean? So in other words, in the United States, the whole United States, if your ISRC code doesn't start with QM, US, or QZ, that ain't a United States code. That's somebody else's code. You know what I mean? And then also, your video code is supposed to match your song code. So if you have your song code, then you go say, well, now I need a video code. And that video code looks totally ass opposite of that the other your music code, then that's also another red flag, because they have to match. It has to say, I'm the video that belongs to this song that's registered back to his company.
Yeah, and the other red flag too is just think of the structure. The first 2 letters is the country code. The next 3 letters are who the code belongs to. And the next one is your indicator, is the year. Because we had somebody send us some codes for a whole album last year, and they had like 2007. It was like country code, they code, and then 7. And I called them on it. I'm like, man, what the hell is this? He's like, I bought like 1,000 codes. I said, man, you know, somebody looking for this record, they gonna think this record that was done in 2016 was done in 2007. You need to change that shit. It's wrong. You can do it, but it's wrong. Like, okay, we're a manager. Well, I called the ISRC and asked them. I mean, I already knew the rules, but it's wrong. And it's just shit in the background that's fucking y'all up later on in life that you don't know about. It's like, man, just do the shit the right way. These people paying you their money, do it right. So just when your indicator is, just think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The next 2 letters should match the year that you're doing the song. So if you're buying codes from somebody else, a second or third party, and that number ain't the year that it is, you already know that it's wrong.
Yeah. You can't use your homeboy code.
Well, your homeboy get paid.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that because I get that a lot. You know what I mean? Yeah.
One last question, and then we'll break for, like, you know, everyone's going to be sticking around, you guys, until 1 o'clock. So the guys are in there. So there's going to be like a little networking thing. We're not going to like kick you out when this is done. So let's have one last question.
Yeah. See.
I really do appreciate the fact that your guys' values are concrete. a relationship with a professional, this applies to both of you. Is there a professional that you would care to share with us that impacted your career in a positive way that brought you here?
Gotcha. You want me to go? Yeah, on my end, it's actually several of them. Well, notably, my teacher, of course. It's one of the type of deals where you never forget where you came from. You know what I mean? My teacher was Larry Anthony. And also Leslie Brathwaite. Also Ray C. Bruce Redeem. I mean, it's just a lot of them, you know. But it's just stuff like that to where on my end, I've always liked engineers that just always talked about sound quality. Not the hype engineers like, yo, man, turn this shit up. Not that engineer. That's the one I just block out of my mental, you know. But now when it comes to sound quality, I'm assuming that's why you guys are all here, you know, because it gets to a point to where people like you guys wouldn't show up here unless it was something that, hey, you may need help with something, or maybe you just want to network. You know, I don't know what the case is, but it's usually because I'm doing these songs and I want and I need them to sound correct. You know, but yeah, so I do have a lot of, you know, good influences. And then also, even all our engineers here, I love these guys. Like, even like when you guys are not here and we're just all talking together, that's all we talk about. How this stuff sounds and what can we do to make it better. And I think, like even on my Instagram one time, I had posted some mixes that Mike Wilson had done. And I was just, the reason I posted it because I was just talking to another group of people about sound quality and how the room should sound and that type of deal. And I just noticed, just like consistently, every time I hit play on one of his mixes, the blends on them are freaking perfect. It don't even look real. It's just like damn, man, this looks like something that I draw, you know. So it's things like that. I don't know. I guess did I answer your question right?
Yeah, you made it clear what you value in your work.
Right.
And I was more asking the people that influenced you, what made them special, and how did they help you like become the person you are?
Got you. What made them special to me is that it goes back to, like I was just saying, it was always about sound quality, you know, because you got to remember, I come from an era to where sometimes when we're doing mixes, it would take from 1 to 2 days to do a mix. You know, remember like Michael Jackson did like, I think beat it 99 times off of reels of tape, you know what I mean? And that's also the era where like nowadays everything is like we call it the microwave industry, fast. So a lot of times you even have artists that just go in the booth and just come up with it. Every artist can't do that. The ones that can, they stand out and they can do that. But then when everybody just tries to follow that, you know, sometimes you need a writer. Sometimes you need to sit back and try to get things right. Stoff is a good artist like that. That dude can go in the booth and you just go, damn, dude. You know what I mean? But everybody can't do that. So I think sometimes the industry needs to slow down a little bit. You know, come up with the right songs. Collab with some people. If you have a producer that's pushing you into a corner, and you're like, yo, my song could be good, but everything's smashed, dude. Give me the track outs. If you can't have that relationship, maybe you need to move on to somebody that's trying to help you. Your friends try to help you. People that don't really give a damn about you, they don't try to help you. And that's why we're all here. Like a lot of us engineers, I just walked out the studio. I didn't get home till like 6 something in the morning and, you know, rolled over and fell out of bed and just got back up, you know. But I get it because we're here to try to help you guys. Like, help me help you, you know. And that's just an honest statement, you know. That's just how we are. That's all I think about, sound. You know, sometimes I lay down thinking about a damn compressor. That's crazy.
So my background is I'm fat now, but I was a DB in my other life about 80 pounds ago. But so I had a scholarship to go to Michigan State and played in the Big Ten. So a lot of my besides my parents and stuff, but my stuff came a lot from coaching and playing sports. And in sports, What I took from it is just no excuses. We had no excuses not to be at practice. It didn't matter if you had a fever, if you were sick, if you tore your knee, if your girlfriend broke up with you. There was no excuses not to be at work and not to be there at a certain time. My coach was in college was George Perlis, and his one of his biggest things was if you 5 minutes early, you 10 minutes late, and that was one rule. But the other rule was if he beat you there, you was late. So it didn't matter, like if your ass was 15 minutes early. If he got there before you, you was getting cussed out. And so, you know, even here when I greeted you guys, I told you that I don't like to punish the people that are on time for people that are late. The people, I think one of the biggest impact that had on me on, you know, and basically us, like Perlis used to always say, the team takes on the personality of the head coach. And although it's two of us that own the place, I feel like I'm the head coach. I've been here forever. And my thing is getting good people first. And so all the people that you met and all the people that you work here, the common thing is that they're good people and they care about music. And with those good people on a team, and we all decide if we working in one direction, I think we can be great. And the biggest impact that had on me is when we first started is that I went to, and I've never told, I still ain't told nobody who this person is, and I'm not gonna tell y'all, but I went to another studio to just find out how much they charged. How do they book time? How do they pay the engineers, just to get information? And the lady shut me down, wouldn't tell me anything. And from that point, I never really went to another studio. I never go on their website. I don't look at nothing that they do. I just focus on us. And I always remember, I told myself that, you know, they the big studio now, but if we ever get to the point where we the biggest and people are looking at us, that I'm going to share the information. I always felt like that Atlanta could be better with more than one good studio, so I wanted to try to make all the studios great. So a lot of different studios that are here, they came after us. They came and toured this place. They sat down with me. I told them who built what, where we got this from. I shared the session reports and stuff like that. And this is just an extension of that. All of those programs is just, we just trying to share the information. As a business owner, and when I was managing the studio, I felt like it was easier to deal with you guys when y'all knew what the hell y'all was talking about. It's easier to book a studio session when y'all know what to ask for. It was getting so bad that the first 30 minutes was just explaining to somebody what a 2-track was. And so they start off down here below the ground. If we can get you guys up to here, we can do better. So my stuff is from a sports background, and then being told no, and then not being threatened by sharing information. Right. You know what I mean? Because y'all gonna tell the truth. And this is the last thing I'll say, Luke, is that we've been here since '95, and we've been doing stuff like this since we started. It's weird for me to see other people try to do this. Now they act like they want to teach y'all. Now they act like they want to listen to your record and give you a critique of it, when before you had to pay them just to take your phone call. Y'all ain't stupid. Y'all know the real, right? Y'all know who really been doing it. You can go back and look at all them videos, and we've been consistent since day one. So the craziest part for me is just to watch all these people that act like they care about you, and y'all know it ain't real. When you get in there, you know if they care about you, if they bullshitting or not. And so it's just fun to come here on a Saturday and see a sold out room from people that are seeking information, and they know they're getting the real. That other shit ain't real. We real over here. Everybody you meet over here. Yeah.
Round of applause, please. Thank you, guys. Thank you.